gaining members from the Liberal Democrats as well. And perhaps their anguish and sense of betrayal is all the more sharp for being so unexpected. Could they really have imagined, during the election campaign, when Nick Clegg could hardly open his mouth without the word fairness falling out of it, that they would be voting for a party that would become an apologist for the most brutal, savage cuts in a generation? Cuts that are knowingly aimed at the most vulnerable. Cuts that, even as the Institute for Fiscal Studies recently confirmed, will hit the poorest hardest and the women most of all. Cuts which are as economically illiterate as they are socially devastating, because it is precisely at a time of recession that we need government investment in jobs all the more. Decimating communities up and down the country. People like the woman who came to my surgery a few weeks ago, desperate to be rehoused because she and her partner and her child were all living in a single room in Brighton, and she was expecting another child soon. And that's why the Green Party is committed to fighting these cuts every step of the way. The Green Party isn't against political parties working together. We've cooperated with other parties on local councils in the European Parliament. Other Green parties in Europe have entered coalitions. And at Westminster, I voted alongside members from all the other parties when that was the right way to represent our policies and our values. And I know too that sometimes that does mean difficult decisions and compromises. And so I don't criticise Nick Clegg and those around him for agreeing to work with the Conservatives, but I do criticise him for the terms of that shoddy deal. Yeah. And amongst Liberal Democrats, the rebellion against this coalition is growing. But, Conference, what an irony it would be if Liberal Democrat members, appalled by the alliance with the Tories, should switch their support to the Labour Party. A Labour Party which, with its obsession with privatisation and PFI, has spent the last 13 years paving the way for this coalition's assault on public services. A Labour Party which has presided over 13 years of increasing inequality, undermining our civil liberties, and plunging us into the illegal and ruinous war in Iraq. With our principles and our courage to be honest with the public about the greatest issues of our time, like climate change, we are the natural home for Liberal Democrats who feel betrayed by their leaders. And so to those Lib Dems I say, join us. Many of your former colleagues are already here. Don't give up on politics. There is a party out there of principle and integrity, and it is the Green Party. And Conference, there are Conservatives too, who see that the kind of government Cameron offers, vacuous on the outside and shamelessly favouring the rich and powerful underneath, is not for them. Many people were taken in by Cameron's silky words on the environment. Vote blue, get green. No wonder he was paid so much when he worked in public relations. Sounds so much better, doesn't it, than vote blue, screw you. Now we see the reality. The Sustainable Development Commission, there to tell government uncomfortable truths, act. The Royal Commission on Environmental Pollution, which has advised on new environmental standards since the 1970s, act. Funding for environmental protection, cut. Green energy targets, weakened. And nothing not one single thing in the Queen's speech to protect our natural world or deal with climate change. Now, within the Conservative Party, there are people who are guided by respect for what's good in the traditions of the past, who believe in conserving our natural environment, who value civil liberties, and who fear an all-powerful state, who want to see one nation and an end to the grotesque inequality that blights our country. And perhaps most of all, who have been horrified by how New Labour behaved in government. They turned to the Tory opposition, and perhaps not realising that they would simply have more of the same. Well, they too will be welcome. And most of all, we should be there to welcome those who've given up on politics altogether. We must offer them hope and live up to our values. Young people who give up on politics before they've even begun, because they listen to the message coming from the big three parties, and they hear nothing at all that speaks to them about the things they're concerned with: climate change, global poverty, the state of the world that they'll soon inherit. So we must make sure that we reach out to them too. And that's why the wonderful work of the Young Greens is so important. Reaching out to new people, giving them a voice. The Young Greens have done a brilliant job, and we need to support them more. I spoke earlier about responsibilities, and one that I feel particularly heavily is our role as an opposition party within Parliament. I doubt that any of us expected the realignment of British politics that has happened in the aftermath of May's election, but its implications are becoming ever more clear. And one of these is that on a whole range of issues, there is no effective opposition to the coalition and its plans. And that's what makes the role of the Green Party more important than ever. Take nuclear power. The Conservatives are in favour, and so are Labour. And now that the Lib Dems have joined forces with the Tories, their ability to put the other side is fatally flawed. And so we have the prospect of a resurgence of a dirty, dangerous, discredited form of power just at the time when we should be, as a nation, investing in the energy sources of the future. And that's why we need the Green Party. It's the same with education. Labour championed the Academies programme, despite all the warnings about the risks of creating a two-tier education system. And now, surprise, surprise, the coalition has dropped any requirement that academies should gain from outside sponsorship or should help those communities most in need. Any pretence of a higher social purpose is out. Michael Gove's plans are simply an ideological opposition to state education and a chance to allow private companies to make profit from our schools. And Labour, having opened the door to this in the first place, cannot mount an effective, principled opposition despite their heroic efforts to try to rewrite history. And that's why we need the Green Party. Take Trident. The public are hardly clamouring to replace it, particularly at a cost of perhaps £100 billion over 30 years. And like many senior military figures, they don't see how it will make us any safer. But again, the Tories are for it, Labour are for it, and the poor Liberal Democrats are going to be let off the leash for the night to vote against, safe in the knowledge that it will go through anyway. And remember, this isn't a minor disagreement about a detail of legislation. This isn't Clause 196 of the Local Government Finance Bill. This is a question of whether Britain will spend £100 billion expanding its nuclear arsenal. And yet there is no serious debate. And that is also why we need the Green Party. We saw it as well, you'll remember, when the Liberal Democrats refused to include Trident in the Strategic Defence Review. That's right, a Strategic Defence Review not looking at our strategic deterrence. That is the kind of policies coming out of the coalition. That is why we need the Green Party. Friends, it is a great pleasure to return to conference and reconnect with the lifeblood of the party. There is so much to do at Parliament, questions to table, answers to chase, amendments to table, votes to make, and all of the rest of the behind-the-scenes activity. And I remain conscious, in spite of all that, about how strange and alien Parliament really is. It's not just the odd language and the arcane procedures and the funny costumes. It is an institution deliberately designed for and run by an elite who simply don't want to let the people have a real say in decisions. I want it to change. But the question is, can Parliament reform itself? I think that the proposed referendum on electoral reform will be a real test. Now, obviously, each different voting system benefits different parties in different ways. The Tories gain from first past the post, so they back that. The Lib Dems gain from almost any change and will take the alternative vote if that's the only crumbs that the Tories will let them have. And Labour, hopelessly divided on this, will try to look like they want change while hoping all the time that they will be able to stick with the current system. They simply can't put aside political self-interest. But Greens believe that the people should choose, not the politicians. Now, of course, at the moment, the public won't be given a real choice. The referendum question only has two options, either the current system or AV, two flavours of vanilla. Genuine reform is not on the menu. And that's why I've tabled an amendment that would give the public a real choice. A choice between all the different voting systems now being used for elections in the UK. And if the other parties decide to oppose it and deny people the right to choose, then they will have failed that test. And I think it's a particular test for those who like to claim the title progressive, whether it's the Lib Dems around Nick Clegg or whether it's the Brothers Miliband. This is the time for them to put aside party interest and live up to the rhetoric about trusting the people of this country. And but for us, that might never have happened. And it's just one example, one more example, of why we need the Green Party in Parliament to represent them. Just one more example, why for all those years, so many people have worked so hard towards this moment when we would take our place rightfully at the heart of British politics. Friends, it has been a long journey, and it has been worth it. We are finally there, and now our work can begin.